What's a job that is so hyped up, but in reality, it's absolutely trash? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Chef. Source: Chef. Cooking gets glamorized a lot. People who are good at or interested in cooking are told they should pursue it professionally. Celebrity chefs make it look like big money rockstar stuff. The reality is very long days with very low pay, even for very high-end skill sets. Answer: also a chef. The great irony of all of it is there's an inverse relationship to how high-end a place versus how much you get paid. The people working at the 3-star Michelin restaurants are the ones working crazy long hours and making very little money. But if you go work for a hotel chain, country club, or corporate setup, you can actually earn a decent living with good benefits and work-life balance. The trade-off is you're usually not making the most interesting or cutting-edge food at places like that. Story 2. Zookeeper. You need a degree but get paid around 14 €, so someone has to be financially supporting you or you won't be able to pay all your bills. It's also shoveling shoot all day outside in any weather, and the workload is literally so heavy to the point your body will start breaking down even in your 20s. You also spend so much time cleaning that there's barely any time spent enjoying, playing, or enrichment time for the animals you take care of. The staff are all animal people like yourself, and probably don't get along with people as much, which leads to staff not getting along at all. Dealing with visitors can be a nightmare, as parents don't want to watch their children as they run around banging on enclosure glass. Adults do this too, trying to get animals to move or react, which is so disrespectful and cruel to the animal who is in their home. I would argue the burnout for zookeeping is one of the fastest for career paths out there. It will break your wallet, your body, and your mental health. Answer: I'm a zookeeper and fully agree. I'm fortunate to be at large institution with a great team and a union, which is what keeps me here, plus the animals, of course. But this industry is so awful at its core. Low pay, long hours, physically dangerous, very little upward mobility, and very few transferable skills. Plenty of places are quick to remind you that if you try to speak up about the working conditions, there's a long line of folks who will happily do your job for less. Also extremely true that you really can't do this career long-term without someone supporting you. If my husband didn't have his job, there is no way I could be doing this, and I have full-time permanency and am paid above award. Story 3. Video game QA tester. Some people think it's a party where you just play video games all day, but QA is regularly shoot on by the rest of the teams, and the monotonous and repetitive test plans and compliance checks can absolutely rip the fun of video games right out of you. Answer: this isn't exactly true. In-house internal QA that are part of the actual dev team are treated as such, and in my 13 years in game dev have always been respected. Love me some good QA peeps, and I've worked with many. Making good impressions in QO is a very common springboard into other, cooler roles on dev teams. It's the external QA farms run by corporate where you're treated as disposable meat. That was my first gig in games. Remember one standout reply from a producer to my bug: if the player is dumb enough to do XYZ and be permanently blocked by in-game fire, they can go die into the fire. Will not fix. Even then, it never eliminated my love of games. At the end of the day, I still got to spend 8-12 hours a day with other cool dudes who liked games. Story 4. Anything film industry, 12-hour days, zero job security, ego, hubris, narcissism, no personal life. Source: I've made poor life decisions. 18 years in, I'm 44. Little late to start a new career, but here I am. Answer: this. Everyone always thinks my job is so cool. Set decorator, sometimes art director. And I always reply that it sounds a lot cooler than it actually is. I'm always tired, always stressed, often go weeks without seeing my daughter even if I'm doing a show in LA, and work too many hours with no overtime pay and no gratitude or appreciation. Before, it was a dream. Yes, it was stressful, but our teams were properly staffed with the appropriate budget for what was needed to execute a good finished product. I was constantly working, never having to worry about money. Now, I'm even more stressed when I'm not on a show than when I'm on, trying to figure out how much more time I have before the well runs dry. 14 years in, I never thought I would be trying to figure out a career change at 40. Story 5. Not a job, but starting your own business. Everyone says you're your own boss and you handle your own time, when the truth is you'll work more than you ever did for someone else. And every problem is your problem. then also end up earning less anyway. The odds are stacked against you because most of the time, there's a bigger business with lower prices but better margins since they have capital. So it ends up that most people who start small businesses oftentimes still work elsewhere to actually support their business because it's hard to compete. Answer: I feel this. I started creating and selling specific planner stickers 10 years ago when it was a niche on Etsy. No one had the idea to create foiled stickers. I wore all the hats of that business. I worked all day, every day. I was creating, producing, shipping, photographing, marketing, etc. It was a major hit when I sent freebies to influencers for a review. I created a brand and learned how to convert my Etsy customers to shop from my website. All in all, I was pushing on average 40-50 orders a day. I had zero free time outside of work. And then Michaels and Hobby Lobby started selling similar items to mine, but at a fraction of the cost. I didn't even try to compete. I closed my business quietly over the course of 2 weeks. The whole venture lasted less than a year. Story 6. Graphic design. Overworked, underpaid, misunderstood, majorly undervalued. Anyone with Canva thinks they can do your job. As a creative person, having to sling creativity on demand like a waitress at a diner burns you out so quickly. Answer: I'm in multimedia design, focusing on motion graphics now, but my first job was in corporate graphic design. Every task is urgent, and everyone expects you to come up with something as soon as you get the request, which usually had very little to go on in my case. Revisions are hell, and one time I had someone literally breathing down my neck and watching me redo the entire layout because their minor revision impacted the entire design, and I had to rework everything. Then they complained about me taking longer than 5 minutes to do it. LMO. Story 7. Former film actor here. It has some good parts, but it's also a lot of long days and nights, travel, hanging around, and repetitive takes. Worse is the impact on your self-esteem. You will learn to view yourself as a product and to compete with other human beings who also see themselves as products. You'll get used to being told that it doesn't matter what you can do, so much as whether you look right while doing it. It's dehumanizing, especially if you are a young person, and especially if you are a young woman. Answer: I was a child actor in my home country, and we didn't have any labor laws in place for kids, and I don't think things are much better now. The US is much better about this. I couldn't cry on command as a 5-year-old, and I remembered that the actress I was with was well respected in the industry. She was our Meryl Streep of sorts. That meanie pinched me nonstop to get me screaming and crying, and I was terrified. I'm not mad at my mom or anyone else for not stopping her. Doing that probably would have ended up in some pretty bad things for everyone involved. You don't disrespect celebrities like her where I'm from, but you can see how the power dynamics are there. Why people in the industry willingly do things they think they'd never do. But when your livelihood was on the line, that actress gave me a whole talk afterwards about acting, dumbed down for a kid to understand, and told me it's not my fault for being too young to know how to cry on command, so that's why she had to hurt me. Even at that age, I thought WTF. Rules and regulations for stuff like this is good. And also, probably don't put your kid into entertainment. Story 8. Video game QA, calling it trash is overblown. But it's not as awesome and fun, and people think it is. And they get a ton of the blame when bugs are found in a live game, when most of the time they did find the bugs, but someone way above them decided not to fix it. They work their jerk off and get paid very little. Story 9. Any job that requires frequent international travel, it's fun and sexy at first, very boring and tiresome after a while. Answer: ha 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 ha. Yes, this. I was so stoked when I got to do my first few trips abroad on company dime. The novelty wears off quickly. You're flying in for events that last a few days. The days are long and tedious. After the actual activities are done for the day, you are strongly encouraged to spend the evening with contacts you've made, etc. You return home jet-lagged out of your mind and exhausted. I avoid these events as much as I can now. Story 10. Game developers. From what I've heard, major game studios take young and enthusiastic programmers who want to work in the gaming industry, milk them of their passion, and then grind them into dust. Long, grueling hours to meet deadlines for bean counters that need to up their quarterly earnings and gear up for the big holiday releases. Answer: although game developers have a special level of this, I feel like any sort of software development can fall into the overhyped category. It depends a lot on where you get employed, but it's super oversaturated that previously more easy barriers of entry have disappeared. So newcomers and even more experienced devs fight to get anything to the point that they accept worse conditions. It's rare to find employers that also truly care about understand tech when dealing with a larger majority of companies, so it's often a case of working on legacy systems or just more outdated tech stacks in general, where any attempt to improve is frequently met with resistance for the sake of the bottom line. Also, it's likely that most of the time you're not even coding, but going from one meeting to the next, especially as you progress, so any passion for building cool things gets bogged down by corporate culture to the point that often one gets burned out with coding altogether. Story 11. Physician, specifically primary care in the USA. Yes, it pays well, but you sacrifice your 20s doing a ton of school, missing events, and racking up $250,000-500K of debt. And then you finally become an attending only to realize you can do your job well, because insurance companies are constantly fighting you to not pay for things that would make patients healthier because their bottom line depends on it. It makes you lose faith in humanity because the system is so fudge. A lot of your time gets drained into calls for pre-authorizations with insurance companies that are only productive a minority of the time and have to be done on unpaid time. Also, you'll have plenty of patients who just need to stop smoking, stop drinking, and eat healthier, and they won't. Answer. My wife is an emergency physician, except she left clinical work and now works as a medical advisor in the health bureaucracy in Australia, so she doesn't even have to deal with insurance companies, really, and debts are far smaller. She now spends a lot of time trying to make the bureaucracy take seriously the issue of how many doctors quit the profession entirely and maybe work out why and try to keep them, which they don't, because it's easier to recruit doctors from overseas instead. More bureaucracy always. Always given the blame for anything bad that happens, when the real reason is usually systemic under-resourcing that you are powerless to do anything about. A culture that doctors help others so they should martyr themselves. Ruthlessly exploited by management who paint any request for more staff as greed, when the real driver is often safety. Many important decisions driven by politicians who know almost nothing about medicine and listen to public whims. And we have it a lot better than the US. People keep leaving the profession, even though it means huge pay cuts, though probably not even a pay cut for general practitioners, most of whom don't earn that much. And being a junior is hell. We still pretty regularly get things like young doctors who die in car accidents to or from work due to exhaustion. Story 12. Anything with sales. They always talk about how much money you can make. In reality, it's a lot of pressure and not that much. Answer. I worked sales in some capacity or other for a few years, and the thing I disliked the most was how little control I felt I had over what I made. I could do everything exactly right and lose a sale for some unknown reason, and at the same time, I could fall jerk backwards into a great, for me, deal with little or no effort. It always felt very fly-by-night, even with big established companies, and I wasn't a fan. Story 13. Social media manager. Everyone thinks it's just vibing online and posting memes, but in reality, it's constant burnout, impossible expectations, 247 availability, and getting blamed for every drop in engagement like you personally offended the algorithm. Oh, and everyone from the intern to the CEO thinks they can do your job better. Story 14. Engineering. Now, first thing is that the working conditions for engineers is actually pretty good. And I think it's in many ways better than other professional jobs. So why is it here? It's a question of unmet expectations. Most engineers study engineering because they enjoy mathematics and problem solving, and generally tinkering with things. Unfortunately, most engineering jobs require no day-to-day maths at all. I might have needed to do something more complicated than calculus twice in 10 years. Instead, you spend all your time filling out paperwork and attending tedious meetings. Then you end up getting pigeonholed in a specific niche, and it becomes nearly impossible to move outside that niche. So you can end up spending 30 years just designing office building ventilation and nothing else. A lot of engineers dream of designing planes, boats, or robots, but instead spend every week filling out TPS reports. Answer. My wife is an electrical engineer and dislike meetings, most of which seem to be scheduled to justify managers' jobs and don't actually improve productivity. Then you have to deal with people who have no intention of actually doing their jobs and fulfilling their customers' demands. And God help you if you're assigned as a checker and have to mark errors in technical drawings. Every designer is going to dislike you. Just like most professions, it's very much who you know versus what you do. My wife got a PE license in 3 states. It took many years. Lots of money and tons of effort, and the company just ignored it despite them requesting that their engineers seriously consider getting the licenses. Meanwhile, someone who takes smoke breaks with the boss gets regular raises and promotions. What a meritocracy, my jerk. Story 15. Registered nurse. Been doing it for 12 years now. If I could do anything else for the money I make now, I would, but I can't. So, I'm sort of stuck. Answer. I disliked nursing for the first few years. Once I changed where I worked, med-surg to ICU, it changed my perspective. I'm in administration now and nearing retirement. There are so many options for nurses. If you don't like direct care, look for a non-clinical role. Try clinic, school, health department, or even prison. Go back to school for your NP or CRNA. Your 12 years are valuable. Don't keep being stuck. There's a way out. Story 16. He'll be the first commenter to mention an actually hyped up job. Construction trades. Everyone says don't go to college. Go into the trades these days. The pay is overhyped. Yes, you can make 6 figures if you put in a fudge ton of hours. But wouldn't you rather work less for more money? And you run the risk of absolutely destroying your body by the time you're 40. A lot of old heads I've talked to, and even some younger dudes, said it wasn't worth it. Answer. A few years ago, I saw a post from a tradesman who pointed out that going into trades advice is quickly becoming the same as go to college to have a career advice. His point was just telling people to go into trades completely ignores the years as an apprentice and doing grunt work before eventually having the necessary experience that lets you work for yourself. Then you open up new problems like managing your business and hiring others because you're at an age where the physical toll is a lot to deal with. Basically, there is no one-size-fits-all advice. Every individual should weigh the options with their skills and interests, or just what they're willing to deal with and accept to make money before they decide which route. War Story 17, Substances Dealer. What you imagine, Walter White or some baller with a bunch of chains and a really expensive SUV? The reality, you live in a mostly abandoned trailer park. All your friends are fake and constantly ask for free substances. You're probably addicted to something yourself, and you have to deal with insane substances addicts for a living. I used to be an addict, and that isn't ideal. All for the same amount of money the average waiter at a busy restaurant makes. And I would answer that. I'll be real. That's not the universal experience. The only real negative is the possibility of getting into legal trouble. That aside, the money is usually crazy good. And for example, a dealer I used to know, his whole job was hang around clubs, have fun, enjoy some substances himself, and do handoffs all night. He would make people's monthly pay in a couple of days of work. There's many flavors of dealers. A different guy I knew wasn't a full-on dealer, but it was his side gig, yet he would still make crazy amount of money for basically partying with people. Being a dealer is one of those jobs where it's pretty obvious what the good and bad parts of it is. You might have a lot of fun and make a lot of money, or you might spend the next 10 years behind bars. What you're describing simply sounds like a bad dealer who happens to live in an abandoned trailer park. Story 18. Porn star. Guys think, oh, you get paid to bang all these chicks. They don't understand how fudge awful it actually is. Answer. Just like any movie, a 12-minute scene probably takes an hour to film, and you gotta stay hard all this time. And can you imagine the chafing from the friction of thrusting for so long without a break? You also gotta be very athletic to hold those positions for a long time. Remember, they're not support to be comfortable or pleasurable. They're supposed to look good on camera. Plus, you gotta deal with someone shoving a camera everywhere. I think a lot of male adult content actors also get surgery to cut a tendon at the top of the male body part to make it more flexible, which also makes it look longer. To top it off, male actors make a fraction of their female co-stars, so they often have to do gay adult content to make ends meet. Pun intended. Story 19. Scrolling through this makes me depressed. Seems like all the jobs out there sucks, and most of the time the reason is low pay and long hours. Why can't we as humanity fix this problem and give people decent pay for 35 hours a week of work? Answer. I'm good at my job, I like my job, and I can roll with much of the punches and dealing with problems out of left field with pretty good experience under my belt. But you are spot on. What makes me dreadful is the bad faith capitalism that most people need to work with. Trying to keep at it feels like a scam. I'm constantly trying to keep my head above water even after all these years. I feel like a livestock for the one. Story 20. Flight attendant is definitely glorified a lot. Yes, you get to travel, but the pay is bad. Hours are tough, and you need to deal with cranky people. Answer. As a fellow FA, I had to scroll way too far to find us. If you calculate a commute and no boarding pay for most airlines, you basically start out at or less than minimum wage, usually wind up in cheap, boring destinations, looking at you Hartford, and deal with an absurd level of entitlement. Not to mention the constant drone of complaints that it's no longer the glory years of flying. Add into it, if you pick the wrong airline to work overtime, it becomes harder to leave. Story 21. Lawyer. Too many law schools churning out too many lawyers. The intelligence and quality of many lawyers is inadequate. Similar to veterinarians, the people who need lawyers the most typically can't afford them. Story 22. Psychologist. The movies make a lot of people think it's cool and want to do it. The reality is that most people want their life or problems to be different, but don't actually want to do the work to change. So most of the time, it's a waste of time talking to difficult people. The ones who are actually enjoyable to work with are serious and do the hard work to change, so you don't get to work with them very long because they get better. Answer. There's also missing underlying issues. It didn't matter how much work I did somehow, it never fixed the depression or anxiety. Quay being several years in burnout, and after I physically couldn't leave the house, I myself work out I'm autistic, get the diagnosis, and then slightly later a combo with ADHD, but not having the money anymore to do that. Never know if any of the depression times were actually depression because it's the same symptoms as burnout, and that's more likely in retrospective review. CBT just made the symptoms worse, gaslighting myself. No one picked it up. Literally none of the professionals. Yes, my parents knew and did a home brand ABA on me. And going back and doing more work just made everything make sense, but ultimately pointless because the issue then didn't lie with me. It was society and discrimination with no options for work that won't make my physical condition worse. It's also barriers to change. Just going to a counselor, therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist is just one piece of the whole and doesn't deal with systematic issues or unable to change home environment. Lacking other supports and resources, it's all just a joke. Edit, sentence adjustment. Story 23. As someone who's in their mid-20s and hasn't really figured out what they want to do with their life yet, this sub is kind of depressing. Sounds like almost every job is unenjoyable and doesn't pay as much as you think. Guess I just have to find something I'm driven about and hope it works out. Answer. Don't view it that way. These are classic jobs, meaning that they are cookie cutter. Accountant, lawyer, chef, police officer, nurse. Not location scout, business development executive, software relationship manager, trade show communications professional, internal communications professional, legal education professional, home inspector, etc. There are tons of jobs nobody has ever heard of that are very rewarding. You'll find one. Read what color is your parachute and it will point you in the right direction. Best of luck, kiddo. Story 24. With the way my state is misappropriating public school funds and the curriculum they're pushing, teaching anything K-12. Answer. Taught 28 years, starting in mid-90s. Back then, teaching was still hyped up until our jobs became tied in with student performance with no child left behind. Suddenly, it became the teacher's fault. Definitely not. Too many overpaid administrators piling tasks on teachers in order to justify their jobs. Poor or no parenting, substances abuse, poverty, or child abuse. The projection of all major political issues and societal problems onto the curriculum and in schools in general, school shootings. Increasingly abusive, threatening students and parents. Misuse and inappropriate manipulation of funds diverted to pet projects like new office buildings, sports facilities, etc. that were supposed to be used for instruction or addition of teaching staff to ease overcrowded classrooms. The constant extreme revision of curriculum causing a lack of consistent instruction and learning, the hijacking of curriculum by corporate textbook companies who grease the palms of state officials, who then require schools to use substandard materials by these companies. I could go on and on. Like most teachers, I absolutely love teaching students despite all of these issues. Sadly, I ended up retiring early because my job destroyed my health. Now there's a nationwide teacher shortage. I worry for our children. Edit. Punctuation. Story 25. So what I'm getting from this thread is every job sucks and I should instead move to the mountains and self-sustainably tent camp for the rest of my life. Story 26. Being a real estate agent, shows make it seem like everything runs smoothly, but there's so much competition because there's so many real estate agents and you have to pay for a lot of things besides your licensing, and a lot of them don't even make crazy money and you're basically on call 247. Story 27. Librarian. No, we do not get to sit around and read all day. We deal with the shoot public, low wages and understaffing, dealing with the idiots challenging books who can't even fudge read in the first place. Bookstore, retail is hell. Story 28. Childcare provider. Oh, you get to pay with kids all day. No, I try to keep multiple tiny humans alive and unharmed despite their constant efforts to maim each other, all while providing enrichment opportunities and assessing development, then get yelled at by parents for not being perfect enough at it. all while making a couple bucks more than minimum wage. Story 29. Locomotive engineer train driver. The classic boyhood dream job, pays well with zero qualifications. In reality, you miss birthdays, Christmas, weekend, etc. You're constantly monitored with cameras and event recorder. Long gone are the days of having any sort of freedom to do anything other than being a glorified button pusher. AI is rapidly coming for our jobs and shift work. A regular sleep pattern is carcinogenic. Story 30. Consulting. It was the business school dream. They hype this shoot up so much. It's just building PowerPoint decks all day and taking shoot from partners and clients. Story 31. Management. Even worse, middle management. Even if you are blessed with good employees, it's just a grind. Always worrying about people's attitudes and putting out fires. I went back to an individual contributor role, and if offered, I wouldn't accept a promotion to run a team for more money. Answer. Beginning of the year. I was put in a minor management role overseeing a small side of the company, and I dislike it. I don't want to be in charge of people, managing them, having to have talks with them when they keep making mistakes. RDK, how long I'll last in this role. Tried expressing it, but boss says I am doing such a good job, and that might be, but doesn't mean I am happy. I much prefer to just be a regular employee, working my shift and going home. The pay increase is not worth the stress it gives me. I was making a good enough living before. Story 32. Went the comp sci route and now sit at a computer every day, so it was expected. But I kind of realized now that I love being outside. Wish I would have been like a firefighter or a forest ranger. Answer. Yeah, I have like an objectively desirable job doing cybersecurity and making good money, and I have lost any real passion I may have had for it over the years. I'd rather be able to make an impact in the real world instead of just working to ultimately line shareholders' pockets. Like if I could be a mechanic and fix things for people and still make a decent living, that'd be sick. Story 33. Tech sales can be insanely lucrative. You don't need a bunch of degrees or to drop hundreds of thousands on med or law school. But the pressure is real. The grind never stops. AI and constant changes can wreck your ability to sell, and your income depends on other people actually doing their jobs, following through on their word. So many variables you cannot control. Plus, your manager or director might be a complete jerk idiot, and there's not much you can do about it. Story 34. International business or international law, which really just means you're on work calls at 2 a.m. due to the time zones. Story 35. I don't know if this counts, but on Breaking Bad, in Better Call Saul, Lydia makes logistics sound way more interesting than it is. I oversee 9 warehouses in 7 states doing 1x billion in freight, blah, blah, blah. Maybe being in the meth business made it more interesting, but it's spreadsheets, Lydia. You look at spreadsheets. Answer. As somebody doing the invoicing for harbor work for parts in Belgium, the UK, Netherlands, and Spain, the biggest issue is IT and the people fudge up inputs, making my job a big pain in the jerk. Fudge those people in Santander, Spain, registering when container trailers leave their yard. Hey, can you please check if this is correct? According to the information I have, the trailer arrived on 2:53 and left on 2:45. Can you verify? Sure, the trailer left on 2:33 instead. It only arrived on the 25th, you moron. Sigh. I seriously wish I could smack them. Story 36. Cybersecurity. It is probably going to be eradicated by AI, and the actual job is just bullshit meetings. Answer. I passionately loved doing the hacking when I got in, but not actually getting to do that because most customers have no money for an in-depth test took all the fun out. The whole job came down to writing down what everyone already knew before the test, just to ignore the whole report. Sometimes weeks of work yield no results because the scope is so limited that there is actually nothing to report. You're supposed to test something that is mathematically proven to be safe. I got out of consulting and only take my own jobs on a per-case basis. Story 37. Personal assistant to tech CEOs. Seems like an awesome job, and it can be in some ways, but the hours and pay tend to suck because if you quit, they'll get 10,000 applicants the next day. Story 38. Working in sitcom TV production. It's great if you are one of the main actors, but if you are below the line, like a set builder, you might be there at 4 a.m. and leave at 8 p.m. doing construction all day. All for some sitcom you'd have no interest in watching anyway, like the George Lopez show. Good union benefits, though. Story 39. Homicide detectives. They show up after the crime, and I am not even sure they are the ones who make the actual arrest when they figure shoot out. Even if they do, they come with an army. They are never at the end of the Silence of the Lambs or that kind of shoot. Story 40. Every job sucks eventually given enough time. The more it involves people, the more it sucks. Think flight attendant. How do they even bring themselves to get on that plane after years of dealing with passengers whose behavior keeps getting worse? I can barely stand it and only fly occasionally. Can't even imagine how city bus drivers manage. Story 41. Being an artist, it's not glamorous. People constantly try to bargain prices or say things like, my toddler could, lots of status hogs and starfuckers. It's a grind. People take advantage of new artists a lot. Burnout is real. Story 42. Video game programmer developer. I hear tons of people on the internet talking about how it's their dream job. They wax long about how video games are everything to them, and they want to make their dream games, etc. Game dev work is long and tedious. Replicating bugs so you can squash them is tedious. Getting the gameplay just right is tedious, and it's hard on your wallet. Game dev doesn't pay well for most folks in the trenches. I was a game programmer and lead programmer a few times, but I wasn't making bank, even though programmers are generally paid more than the rest of the staff. We were living paycheck to paycheck, and it's hard on your resume. Why did you only work at Company B for 6 months? They went under. And Company D? They went under. And Company E? They went under. That's if you even get an interview with such a slipshod CCV. It looks bad, but it's rarely your fault, and you rarely get to work on your dream game. Most of the games you work on, you're assigned to work on, no matter what they're about. My one dream game never got published. The parent company shut down our entire division after about 6 months. They were horrified that it could take 18 months or more to develop a game. They thought they could be developed in a couple of months. I loved my time in the game industry, but it was volatile and very different than I dreamed it would be. And I earned way less than my counterparts in the straight software development industry. And I had to move a lot just to work my next gig. Story 43. Working in comics. It's extremely hard on your body to be at the drawing table 14 hours a day. The pay hasn't increased substantially since the 80s. And the talent pool had become a talent ocean. Companies hardly pay royalties anymore. Your independent comic probably won't be a hit and won't get a production deal from Hollywood. And if a character you created ends up in a Marvel movie, odds are good you won't see a dime or a career boost. Collaborators are flaky. You need a stable partner to help support you to get your foot in the door. And all it takes is an editor change to claw back all your hard work. And odds are good you'll die young. It's really fudge fun to make a good comic book, though. Story 44. Grocery store owner. It's hyped in that the public demonizes you for price inflation and assumes you are a rich millionaire sitting on the hill, laughing into your 100 bills while people struggle to afford food. The reality is margins are razor thin, customers are disrespectful to staff and product. If you change your mind, leave it with your cashier. Don't dump it in a random freezer aisle for it to be stored at incorrect temperature. This makes things more expensive for everyone. It is often a 55 to 60 hour a week job, and people underestimate the demands qualifications necessary to be successful. Don't you just put cans on the shelf? And lastly, you sacrifice a lot of your own family time, weekends, holidays, to serve the public who quite often do not appreciate or respect you. Story 45. Dispensary bud tender. I worked at one of the first medical depots in Ohio back in 2020. It was absolutely awful. The customers were so mean without cause. They would just walk in ready to fight with everyone about everything every single day. The company itself was terrible, and there was constant pressure to sell more product. But we weren't allowed to say certain things or we would get in trouble with the OH Board of Pharmacy because they were always listening through the cameras. I worked there for a year and got promoted very quickly, which was cool. But it sucked the life out of me while I was there. Everyone always says it was probably the best job ever. And I mean, it was cool, but not cool enough to be worth all the bullshit. Story 46. Hospitality. 24-hour business means emails even while you sleep, weekend holiday work, and graveyard shifts in a full suit. Mr. Mosby made it look easy. LOL, but I understand why he was always yelling. Story 47. Scientist. The research part is great, but as an applied researcher for a government agency, you also spend so much time justifying why what you do is important to decision makers who decide your fate, but aren't themselves scientists. Story 48. Finance. I do my job in 3 hours of the workday and just wait for people to message me on Teams, which rarely happens. Whilst WFH, wait, my job is awesome. Story 49. Flight attendant. It does eventually get really good, but only if you're willing to suffer for the first several years and through the several-month nightmare that is initial training. You'll be doing all the exhausting red eyes and low-credit domestic turnarounds that the seniors don't want while making poverty-level wages. You'll have to put yourself on reserve, on call in case someone calls in sick, if you want a chance at getting called in for good flying. Story 50, architecture. Not absolute trash, but the pay is the same as the minimum wage for 5 years of sleep deprivation and self-loathing, and X more years for training before you actually become an architect. The money isn't in design, it's in construction. Story 51, professional left boot cleaner. You only get half the money of someone who cleans both boots. I recommend going all out to be a 2-boot cleaner. Story 52. Olympic athletes imagine 4 a.m., training every day, swimming in a pool. No adult beverage in your 20s. Getting paid less than if you were just out working a normal job. Answer. I used to be roommates with a former competitive ice skater. Same story. Up before dawn, training every day in a rink. Not much emphasis on formal education beyond high school. He skated in a show at Six Flags or something. But most of his skater friends were with Disney on Ice, World Figure Skating Tour, etc., where they were paid very little. If you won an Olympic medal and were a name of sort, you'd get paid more. Skating was also really hard on the body, and my friend needed 2 hip replacements before he turned 40. Story 53. Anything at an ad agency except owner. I've worked for people who make Don Draper look like a toothless kitten. Story 54. Nurse. You're loved when people need you. Get treated like trash by patients in the hospital, but you are screwed because you care about others. Story 55. Software developers, engineers. 4-6 years ago, it was great, but the 150K WFH gigs are rare now, years of experience, and they're in constant fear of being laid off. Answer. Even with years of experience, it seems even senior devs are competing for junior roles now because they've all been outsourced, LOL. I actually like the job itself. Programming is generally pretty fun. But my God, the interview process is hilariously bad, absolutely does not respect your time whatsoever, and is terrible at determining if someone's a good programmer anyway. And you're always at risk of being laid off through no fault of your own because a contract falls through or ends. Despite being a full-time employee, they'll just set you up and fire you anyway. Also, quite annoying having to relearn a new framework or library over and over again, but employers don't want to give you the time to learn them while working on it. Just the bare minimum to complete the task, and that's it. Your mileage may vary, though. Story 56? Well, I have to say, after reading these posts, thank you everyone for all you do. Whatever it is that you do, thank you for giving everyone the opportunity to be able to connect with you. What you give and do. Every one of you can and do make a difference, especially the people that take pride in what you do. I respect you and you motivate me. You know the things that you have done, what you have given, and you do make a difference in people's lives. I wish I could go in and describe all of those things that each of you do and contribute. Thank you for what you provide and help make our lives that much more. Story 57. Turns out high-paying jobs suck for a reason. As an engineer making 6 figures, if I could make the same money at McDonald's, I would in a heartbeat. Story 58. EMT. Sounds cool, but unless you're a paramedic, you're most likely a glorified taxi service that takes people to and from dialysis centers or to and from one senior nursing facility to another one all shift long. Shifts can be 24 hours for slightly above minimum wage for the first 8 hours. You don't do any invasive procedures because at that level you can't get the qualifications to do so. You're usually overworked and way underpaid. Story 59. Apparently being a lawyer isn't great unless you get higher up in a good firm. And even then, it seems to be a lot. Story 60. Controversial opinion, but I think surgeon. I dated one and he had all kinds of issues and stress, and all of his surgeon friends were equally messed up. They were extraordinarily gifted people. But I think treating people like cars in the shop can affect your brain a bit. The pressure must be intense. Story 61. Software engineer. I worked at a FANG company for 5 years and now work at a startup. I'm not actually a software engineer. I'm a cloud engineer, but I know a lot of SEs and they all get burnt out after 6 months. The pay is ridiculous, but even that sometimes isn't enough to retain them. Story 62. I mean, all of them. Some positions are great, but most positions in any field end up sucking. Everyone hypes up tech. I work in tech, amazingly without a degree in tech. Anyway, I love my job. But I would be out the door if I never got promoted. It's just the same shoot day in and day out. Literally, even cool jobs like in science or engineering, you do the same shoot every day. You don't just get to do cool stuff like on television. It's only fun if you are a boss, and even then, that's not fun because your main job isn't the fun stuff either. It's trying to convince people, board or directors, to let you do stuff or fund your projects. I'm lucky and I know that. but I will never have my dream job, surgeon, because I have too much anxiety and I don't think that would have worked out. So maybe I'm jaded, but it seems like every job is just repetitive garbage. And then even when you do get to a higher position, you just get to see how absolutely dumb everyone is and fix their mistakes over and over again. And I've been working since 8 a.m. fixing a report. It's now almost 11 and I just logged out. Also, on that note, where are all these people who work from home like me, but just do fudge all day? Absolutely not like me. I automated what I could in secret and I get paid a hefty bonus for working overtime. Bonus form BCM salary, but I am busy. Anyway, this is a long-winded way to say that the tech industry isn't all that wonderful. It took me a while to get used to literal all-day screen times, but I used to have headaches from it. I'm so immobile now, so I had to find ways around that. The money is fine. The WH is fine, but the work is boring and I'm angling my way to different positions in the future. Story 63. Welding, especially starting out. It takes a lot of practice depending on the person, and that practice can be so frustrating. If you're lucky enough to get someone to give a chance with hiring you, you have to deal with people who act like teaching someone who is starting out the worst thing in the world. Story 64. Investment banking PE. Horrible hours, no work-life balance, hard to see friends, very little autonomy, corporate slave, often not treated with respect or appreciated for doing good work, not as intellectually stimulating, challenging as it's made out to be. Gets better if you move high enough up the ladder, but by then, you've probably not enjoyed your 20s, early 30s much. In some firms, you still work crazy hours even into your 30s and 40s when you have a family. Great pay exit ops, though. Story 65. Working as a bud tender in the legal shops in Canada. The pay is usually minimum despite having to know about regulations, genetics, accessories, the types of concentrates and their differences, what to recommend for people while tiptoeing your wording. No, I can't recommend anything for sleeping or anxiety, but these gummies sure will make you tired. Lazy doctors will send their patients to us rather than research themselves and get ahead of a new, burgeoning and legal industry. Customers can be excellent, but often more prone to disregarding rules. You can't open a beer in a liquor store. What makes you think you can open your bag in a plant substance store where everything is sealed, tax stamped? Or more nasty customers. I had a guy with a necrotic, rotting hand last month. My first time seeing bare phalanges. Customers being too fixated on high THC percentages had destroyed proper plant substance. Government allows a 6 leeway on bud EE, and I think 15 on concentrates. Most 30 bud on the market is going to be mid-20s. 21 plant substance shouldn't be getting me higher than plant substance labeled at 32 THC, so I don't trust high companies anymore. Too much greasiness in the market. Story 66. IT engineering. I'm a tech engineer myself, and let me tell you, if you think you can get your uni degree and then work for some high-level tech company in a cushy computer job, you're in for a disappointment. IT degrees are mostly worthless in the field. Technology-specific certificates hold a lot more weight. So after doing your several years of college to get a degree, ready to conquer the tech world with your skills, you will be either given a call center job, resetting passwords for people that have no patience to speak with you or follow your instructions, or unpaid internship as a junior programmer. It's not until you climb the ranks for 10, 20 years when you can get into the actually good stuff. Most of the IT jobs are just MSP grind with no recognition or respect. Story 67. Flight attendant. 17 years and my salary hasn't changed in 5 years. A lot of unpaid work, around 37 hours unpaid a month. Story 68. Being a doctor. 36-hour shifts, working overnight, working on weekends, 120-hour weeks, 10 years of training, continuous exams, lawsuits, pressure from management, from bosses, from patients, ungrateful entitled families, Dr. Google, now Dr. AI, people feeling they could do your job easily, getting replaced by AI or other staff members who do much worse than you, but then you take the liability for their actions if they fudge up. Being a liability sponge, having shoot work-life balance, PTSD, watching people die in front of you after trying to save their lives for hours, then getting blamed by the family. Yeah, great job. The pay is average for what you do. On your feet the whole day, high pressure, high stakes, one mistake can eliminate, but then you get paid less than an investment banker who chills in the office. Answer: well, to be fair, some investment bankers. Investment banking as a junior associate sucks. You work long hours, 11, 13 per day, often 6 days a week, are the meanie of some MD, managing director, making mediocre pay in hopes of making it to be an MD where you're a partner and make real money. There's a healthy dose of survivorship bias because most burn out. Now, don't get me wrong, medicine sucks too, depending upon what you do. Too much schooling, especially in North America, to become one. Huge debt, long hours, residency sucks. First year on page seems to break everyone. Patients and families can erode your empathy. And then the cognitive dissonance of an often system and society-induced God complex, not all physicians, with, as you note, an inability to save someone when you did all you can and then to be blamed for it. But pay-wise, relative to other careers, it's not bad. If you become an attending, you make fairly decent pay, and the range of pay, save some areas, derm, plastics, ophthalmology, isn't as varied as an eye banker or lawyer. Now, if you're an MD at Goldman, life can be pretty sweet. Dr. Google and Dr. AI isn't necessarily a bad thing. Informed patients who use that to better understand their conditions and research can be productive, but it's balance between a patient asking questions based on research and still recognizing the person with 10 years of schooling and however much post-residency work experience probably does know more than them. Now, some Dunning-Kruger moron who read God knows what blog and pontificates about anti-vax this or whatever is supremely galling. Story 69, Blue Mage. It's just never worth the effort to learn all those spells from enemies and still not be OP. Story 70, Freight brokering. Yeah, have fun dealing with truckers and warehouse and having to be on call 24/7 even on PTO. Story 71, Chief AI officers. Organizations are overly emotional about it. It's the best thing ever, or everyone need to use it, or they'll become irrelevant, or it's going to doom our organization. Although it's kind of funny to watch IT and data teams arguing over who owns AI, then both ultimately failing to deliver any real value and blaming each other. In the end, it screws everyone. So much time, expertise, and partied too hard on failure to launch pilot studies. Story 72. Game developer. It's not absolutely trash, but it's got a lot more sharp edges than I thought it would. Story 73. Politician. Even a small town one. Everything's varying shades of bad all the time. But then there's the odd parade and ribbon cutting. Story 74. Lately, dog, senior design work. Somehow I've become a production artist and it's yucks. Golden handcuffs, though. Story 75. Public relations and media. Thankless, low-paying for most, long hours, and clients with so many issues you could bill them by their ICD-10 diagnoses. Story 76. Surgery here. Long hours, taking call, covered in bodily fluids, standing for long periods of time in poor posture. Story 77. Anything tech-related. A few people get unicorn jobs, the rest get temporary projects every couple of years. Story 78. The cannabis sector. It operates as a startup culture and is full of vultures and criminals who pay their employees shoot. That is, unless you are the owner or sweat equity co-owner, who is also the general manager. I was the latter, and the responsibility of the entire company rests on your shoulders. Even at that level, you can find better paying jobs with better benefits in other sectors. Story 79. Archaeology. You don't get paid much. It's hard manual labor, ticks, poison vegetation, silica, other hazards. Can be rewarding, but also destroys you day by day, mentally and physically. Source, am an archaeologist. Story 80. Sales or sales leadership. It's good money if you do it right, but the years it takes off your life PTSD hustle culture is draining. Story 81. Interior designer, especially high-end hospitality, overworked and underpaid. I get paid less than some bus drivers and waitresses. We design stuff that most of us can never afford. A lot of tedious and repetitive work, like spec sheets, client meetings, construction drawings, budget and coordination with trades or architects. We get asked us to go for after-work drinks on our own expenses just to connect with the team and as market research. I know many junior and intermediate designers take less than $4,000 home, and a cocktail is $20 in the bars we go. Downtown Toronto. Story 82. Anything in the entertainment industry. You are overworked and underpaid. If you're a woman, you are treated like the scum of the earth for simply having a female body part. Story 83. Fashion industry. It's women-dominated except for many of the head designers and art directors who throw their weight around and create an environment that stifles creativity. So many egos. Free clothes are amazing, but it's a wasteful industry. BC, you're expected to wear the most current fashions and styles. Be a buyer is all about Excel sheets and trying to find comparable styles to what sold well last year during the same season. Even when you're working in a high-end company with ethical practices, there are still a lot of sketchy things that happen. Samples only come in one size 6, And when you're thin, you're given a ton of clothes, but once you're in size 8 and above, people act as if you're no longer stylish or attractive. It's honestly soul-crushing and weird. I'm grateful to be out of the industry now. Story 84. Being a pilot is actually super sick for anyone. Feeling like every job they ever thought was cool is on this thread. Story 85. It has to be flight attendant, surely. So often characterized as glamorous and adventurous, yet actually no more than a glorified waiter's job, walking up and down handing out microwave meals and pouring drinks out of cartons. Story 86. Wildlife ecologist biologist. Every article about us makes it sound like we're shooting galloping bighorn from a helicopter with dart guns. In reality, it's a highly competitive and oversaturated field where most people are stuck doing what they dislike. 1. Most people get into the field because they want to touch animals. 99% of the time, you do not get to touch animals. Working directly with wild animals is always a gamble because you could overstress or injure them. Most wildlife projects now rely on indirect monitoring using counts, game camera photos, eDNA, audio, etc. Most data collection now happens in front of a computer, and majority of wildlife jobs might entail 1 or 2 weeks in the field and the rest in an office. I know people who have worked on a single species for over a decade and have never seen it in the wild, let alone touched it. 2, there's almost no room for advancement. Most people work short-term technician positions and fight and struggle for any of the few permanent positions available. Some states have less than 50 permanent biologist positions of any grade. 3, the job has 2 parts, office work and field work. It is never a good ratio. Most ecologists spend months or years in the office planning, have a limited window to accomplish a very intense field season, then spend months or years analyzing data. You get into the career because you love animals, and 75% of the time you're in front of a computer or in meetings. 4, field seasons, the fun part, are usually difficult, intense, stressful, and boring. You work in places where animals live, i.e., where it's hard for people to be. My current field site is at 6,500 elevation, extremely rugged, and I hike upwards of 10 miles a day with a 40-pound pack. My body is wrecked. You work on the animal's schedule, which too often means at night. Right now, I usually work 2 a.m. to 3 p.m. and never get enough sleep. You don't just collect data on your animal, but everything that affects them. Right now, I have to collect data on soil texture, in addition to everything else. Under the best conditions, you struggle to get enough data. Under the worst, entire projects are scrapped because of bad luck. And 5, our funding comes from people. We don't get to work on whatever we want. We work with species important to people who pay our bills. Most ecologists study animals that are either 1, something humans eliminate for sport, or 2, humans have eliminated so many of them, we're worried we might eliminate them all. Every project is a tragedy if you love the animal you study. 6, there is very little job security, even before the recent mass federal firings. Funding in the field has always been uncertain and is often dependent on weird aspects of state and federal budgets. Even people with seemingly permanent career positions can lose them due to faraway forces. The Idaho Fish and Game Furbearer program is funded 100% by the sale of firearm ammunition. If people stop buying enough bullets for just 1 year, they cut the program. I just lost a quarter of my annual project budget because Trump was voted into office and my funders wanted to hold some money back because they didn't know what other projects might get cut. 7, most people we interact with dislike us. If you study manage a species people eliminate, harvesters are mad at you for not letting them eliminate more, and non-harvesters are mad at you for facilitating eliminate. If you study manage a species threatened by extinction, you basically get hired to somehow turn a dumpster fire into a victory garden. The people who lit the fire dislike you. The public dislike you for wasting taxpayer money and or your accomplishments. And half the time, the federal government dislike you for making their lives harder. I've been shot at, suffered verbal and physical assault, and received passing threats because an endangered species I worked on didn't have the decency to go extinct. 8, the job pays nothing but positions are competitive. You need a degree, years of experience in a field with few paying job opportunities. Most people turn to volunteering internships to get experience, which can only be afforded by people with outside, usually parental, support. The majority of people in this field are antisocial rich kids with trust funds. If you do manage to scrape by and get paid, you usually make $40K or less per year. 9, if you are lucky enough to work on a species project that actually handles wildlife, it's often a tiny portion of your work. I specialize in using GPS collars to track carnivores. I spend hundreds of hard hours in the field to catch less than 10 animals a year, and each workup is about a half hour. 10. You have very little control over your life. Where you live is based on available jobs, and most people move multiple times a year between gigs. Your housing is often dictated by your employer. Mine has ranged from hotel rooms to a cot in a garage to a tent. Your work hours and field seasons are governed by the biology of the animal, the weather, and natural disasters. Funding is often governed by people you've never met and forces outside your control. Story 87. Games tester. Shoot jobs, shoot pay, and if anything breaks on release, everyone comes after you with pitchforks and torches. Story 88. I put a bet on influencer and OnlyFans. It seems a lot of people really want that, but it's dehumanizing and objectifying. Story 89. Trades. Any trade. I'm a spark, and I swear I must be living in an alternate reality to what laymen say the life is like online. Story 90. Working at a famous place. I'm being intentionally vague here. Managers act like they're doing you the biggest favor in the world by allowing you to work there. It was the most toxic place I've ever worked. Backstabbing and power tripping. I'm sure the same goes for lots of other well-known places too. Story 91. I really can't imagine being a full-time streamer. Your job depends on others not working, so you only work during afternoons and nights, so you only really socialize with other streamers who are by default all a bit narcissistic. If you stop streaming for a week, your income goes down by 80. If your niche that made you big stops being in, you're done. Yes, you get tons of money and events and such, but it has to be so extremely exhausting with all the pressure to constantly go live. You always need a camera with you, and most streamers retire after only a few years, which I totally see why. Story 92. These kinds of comment threads destroyed my mental health in my early 20s and convinced me not to pursue a lot of my passions. If you're reading this and you feel drawn to a career mentioned here, fudge, go for it. Reddit has a major negativity bias. Story 93. Being a doctor, people tend to believe that all you do is recite what you read on some book years ago and cash in a fat check. But at least where I'm from, you get okay pay, at most, and ludicrous amount of patience and hours working for public health care. But that is necessary if you want to get people on your private practice. So working 16-hour days and 7-day weeks is quite common. This on top of having to study the rest of your life and knowing that a single mistake can cost you your whole career, or even worse, someone's life. Maybe absolute trash is a bit harsh, but it's in no way what most people make it up to be. Story 94. Nursing. Made out to be some sort of healing angel for the masses, but it's a ton of physical labor, dealing with assholes all day. And at any point, the hammer could come down on you if you didn't catch an ailment quickly enough, or the nanny doesn't communicate the daily activists properly. I literally have no qualms about cleaning urine and fever or go IF bed baths. Whatever, I'd love to see my friend win. Story 95. Not really a career-type job for most people, but working rides in an amusement park. I did it for 5 years. Everyone, myself included, comes in expecting it to be a big party the whole time. And it absolutely was. But first you had to get through your 15-hour shift doing tedious repetitive labor in the 100F heat, while people continuously accuse you of ruining their vacation and threaten violence because you won't let them hold their newborn in their lap on the Puco-Tron Extreme 2000. We routinely started the season way overstaffed, and by the end of the first month, we're desperate for more people to replace everyone who couldn't hack it. It's an experience I wouldn't trade for anything, but would absolutely never do again. Story 96. I've seen a lot of comments on here, and to be fair, I don't have nearly as bad as a complaint as some of you all do. Please just be nice to retail folks. Story 97. Not a single comment mentions being a barber. I studied engineering stuff. Should I pursue that? D. Answer. No, it sucks. You have to stay at the same place to make any money. I moved to another state and had to start over at 35 after working at the same shop for 10 years and am making the money I was making at 19 years old because I don't have a clientele here. People are really disgusting. Just think of the most disgusting person you've ever walked by in public. You'll have to cut their hair and they will have goo behind their ears. Most people are fine, but you don't even realize how disgusting a lot of people are until you have to touch them. I puked on a customer once because he was so disgusting. You don't get to make your own hours like you think you do. I've worked with so many shoot coworkers who will steal your clients or gossip all day. There's a million more reasons, but it'll stop there, Elmo. Story 98. Project manager. You're basically just everyone's whipping boy, just there to take the blame and get shouted at. Story 99. Consulting. Yes, pay is good at times, but you are just used and abused by either the company or the client. Story 100. I feel like the vast majority of jobs get hyped up or are made to sound a lot more glamorous or even simpler than they actually are. The truth is, with the systems in play and the culture we've fostered, most jobs suck. Story 101. Some might disagree, but programmers in general are treated like shit and regularly overworked to meet unrealistic deadline. Bosses thinking you have AI tools now can handle workload of 4-person. Story 102. Wedding coordinator. It's not glamorous, it's hostage negotiation with centerpieces. You're underpaid, overworked, and somehow responsible for everything from the missing cake topper to why the groom's mom disliked the playlist. It's Groundhog Day every weekend. You don't plan a day, you survive it. Story 103. In the 2000s, all the CSI TV shows and spin-offs did their best to make it look sexy, but being surrounded by decomposing bodies all day long would, in my mind, be the single worst job out there. Story 104. Customer service, but I still work since the job market right now is terrible, and having any source of income, whether big or small, helps. Story 105. Club bouncer, having to stand at the front door of a busy nightclub, dealing with belligerent drunks inside and angry people outside waiting to get in, shoot hours, horrid pay, and constant shoot talk from random strangers. Yeah, standing outside in the cold night dealing with drunks doesn't sound very fun, nor is it in practice. Story 106. Jake from State Farm, insurance agent. Ridiculous money, killer benefits. $3,000 starting bonus and 3 months of training on your jerk at home, including a week of training in Bloomington, Illinois. And then they just throw you out like a bird out of the nest with no experience. I had only 8 hours a day to work, people's lives in my hands, having to tell people that drip behind the wall meant they weren't covered because they didn't see it, and it caused their whole floor to rot out. I had to know how houses were put together. I had to deal with hundreds of phone calls a day, and I had an area as large as the top half of my state to cover. You would spend 4 hours of your day working on one person's case while 6 more come in. You dreaded every single weather event because you knew the work was piling up. My brain never truly clocked out at the end of the day. I had many sleepless nights, grinding my teeth. I would wake up with my jaws fully clenched. I thought of eliminate myself during a Zoom call. Then I just up and quit. I would not recommend that job to anyone. Needless to say, I lasted 3 months. Story 107. Full-time YouTube content creator. Anyone relying on Google for their complete financial livelihood has absolutely no security. Their entire lives and career could be snatched away at any given moment by a company that has no obligation to justify or explain why. Story 108. I'd say many management roles. I'm in IT support management. It's not like you're the big boss and do things your way. You only get an unrealistic task or goal, and you're responsible for it, even though in 75 of the cases, you have no direct influence on things.